So I am Eva. I am studying film production at Christchurch University. I just started, so I am quite new in the filmmaking industry. But I am interested in directing and production design because I really like the visual part of a film, basically.
And that's the opening of this week's episode of the show. Welcome back, everybody, to the My Generation podcast. You've just heard there from Ava. She is a film production student, as she just said, from Canterbury Christchurch University. Today, we're talking film. She's a director. We're going to also be talking about production design. We've had filmmakers on the show before, and we're just going to keep expanding that discussion. It's been a really great one. We had Ollie Patterson on the show recently as well, who you're going to be working with. He's talking, when I say you, I mean Ava. Ava's going to be working with Ollie on a cool project we've got coming up. And we talked more about the visual artwork in his episode, and that was, I think, episode 60. And so here on episode 64 of the My Generation podcast, we're talking about production design and directing with Ava. We've also got loads of really cool features coming up on the show. We've got Anna E, a musician. She comes onto the show this week. We've featured some of her music on the podcast before. And then we've got Sammy Bacon and Harry Munday, who come onto the show every single week to do a album review and a film review. Their section is flying now. They're both on the show very regularly, and we've got more key contributors coming up on the show in the future, but they'll be coming up later on in the show. So stick around for 2 songs by Anna E, Harry Munday's film review, and Sammy Bacon. But Ava, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. So, as you said in the opening, you're into film. Where did that love for film start?
I think I was just very, very young because I really liked watching films, and I think I wanted to get into theater. I didn't know what directing was exactly, so I wanted to be an actress at first. But as I was getting older, I was thinking, no, I want to control the visuals. I just want to make the film. I don't want to act in the film. So I started doing a bit of a research into what goes into production. And that's when I decided that I wanted to do directing.
Interesting. So, yeah, starting off from that side of acting, though, it gives you that, experience of what it's like being in front of the camera at the very least. So when you're directing, you know what it's like in the actor's shoes, right?
Yeah, kind of. I never really acted professionally. It was always something in the back of my head. I don't think I would be able to do it now, but yeah, for sure, you can definitely tell how you want your actors to act when you've acted in the past.
And what was the moment then that you realized theater was actually your love was actually for filming?
Yeah, because I really like edit as well. And I like the idea of, I think it was when I just started watching TV with my family, just something really casual. There wasn't really a big moment. It was just always something in the back of my head.
And yeah, it's a sort of crept through, and now it's the forefront of what you do. And I mean, I have my roots in theatre as well, so I can thoroughly say that transition is quite a natural one. I think a lot of really great film writers come from that field. And just before we continue, I did want to mention, probably should have done at the start, that the reason why we're doing this episode online as opposed to a physical My Generation podcast episode where, we're sat with the guest. We've had the past few weeks have all been like this as well. Due to, the outbreak, we are unable to bring episodes with guests in person as we're recording this on the 1st of April 2020 for context for you. But moving straight back to Ava and continuing the discussion, were there any sort of major inspirations that you had growing up that sort of moved you in this direction of wanting to get into the more production?
Yeah, actually. I think the first director, and I think it was the first director for most people that decided to do film, was Tarantino. I think it was when I watched his films and I thought, I want to do that. I just want to do exactly the same thing with my own stories. And especially with production design, because I loved the way he could portray the stories.
And are there any sort of specific examples from specific films and would they just pop out as like, that was it, that was the one I want to make now?
Do you remember the fight scene from Kill Bill, film 1?
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, that was it, I think, for me. Yeah, for sure.
And that's got a lot of incredible choreography to it, hasn't it, as well? So there's so many elements in that scene.
Yeah, exactly. So many elements. And the color palette, the production design, the acting, everything was just so insane. And I really want to do something similar to that.
Yeah, and I know what you mean about color palette as well, because you've got people like Wes Anderson who are sort of have been changing the game year on year with just insane color design in their films, right?
100%. Yeah, he's number one now for sure.
Oh, he's number one. What, Wes Anderson?
In my list, yeah, for production design. I mean, it's Adam Stockhausen, isn't it? That does the production design for him. He does the production design for Wes Anderson's films. He's amazing. The color palette and the idea of a dollhouse type of vibe. I really liked it. I don't know, because it reminds you of reality, but something fake as well from a fairy tale.
Yeah, yeah, there's something so magical about it. I mean, even with, and I think he's taking it to new extremes every time. Like, the name is completely gone, but it's the new movie he's going to be releasing soon, the one starring Timothy Chalamet. And just the amount of different set pieces in that, and you've got like things going through walls and destroying set pieces every second of that trailer. I'm thinking, how on earth did he make a set like that? How did he do it?
I know, even the trailer is like a film by itself, isn't it? Like if you were able to just do the trailer, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so that was good enough on its own. Okay, now I'm going to get a full movie alongside it.
For sure. Yeah, I think Wes Anderson is one of my biggest inspirations when it comes to production design, because even though the camera work is amazing itself, the way you get to see the characters and what is their actual nature just from the production design and the world that is surrounding them is just so magical to me.
And that's sort of inspired your journey. I wanted to now go into like some of the work you've actually done. What work have you done where you've actually had like a specific focus on production design? Could you talk us through what that process was like?
So I started by trying to do photography, and I would work with different elements in my house, in my room, for example. I would try to build some stuff to put around my room and just take pictures of myself. It was like nothing serious. But then when we started making films at uni, it was when I started more seriously about it and thinking that it's one of the most vital elements in a film and the story itself.
Oh, amazing. And in the student films, could you sort of paint a picture of what production design work you've done on a project?
Yeah, so basically, what production design is everything that the audience can see in the frame, anything visual that is in the frame. And a production designer is basically the eyes of the director. So you're basically trying to help with these decisions when it comes to choosing a location, props, costumes, set dressing. And in general, you're just building the world around the character. So it can be from building a room in a house, like a park, to a spaceship. It can be anything in between. There's no limits. So what I have personally done was do a living room and a bedroom of one of my characters in the latest film that I've done with my group, and I was also the director. So I had to make the decisions by myself. But in general, when you're doing production design, you're trying to communicate with the director and just basically try to understand their vision and what they want to portray into the film.
Oh, that's interesting because, yeah, it sounds like they've got quite a nice link at least. So if you're going to have to double up on roles, that's a good one to be doubling up on. When you were doing the production design for this latest project, like, because production design is something I can't do. It's probably one of my weakest areas overall in the whole of film. Where would you say you begin then with your production design? How do you go about even researching what you're going to do for it?
So the first thing I would do is, if I was directing, just decide how I view the characters, what is their nature. Otherwise, I would have a talk with the director and ask them what they think of them. And then the next thing is do a research. For example, if the film is from a different era, if it's a period film, or if it's a sci-fi film, you need to do a research on the material relating to that time and environment, so you can make it as realistic as possible. And then I would start creating mood boards and writing down more specific ideas about things I would like to include. But my main thing is to try to find the right color palette and combine that with different shapes and textures so I can create meaning in a thing or a character or just a film in general.
Yeah, and I bet it's quite a unique process, because when I'm a very sound oriented person, so I kind of want to think about the feel of, what a scene is, what you're experiencing around you in terms of sound. But is sort of the production design the first thing you think about when you start a project? Then where do you start first, even before like specifically planning production design? Is that one of the first things you jump to when you get on a project?
Yeah, because when I'm reading a script for the first time, which is also the first thing you do with production design, I'm just thinking of it visually. I think that's just how my brain works. When I'm reading a story, I'm just trying to see the visuals behind it. So I'm thinking of the props, I'm thinking of the colors, I'm thinking of where I would put each thing, furniture, anything. Um, so that's where I would start. I would write down ideas because I always forget. I always forget about them. So I would always have my pad with me and just write down anything that I can think of, and then I decide what I will actually include and what I will just not.
And when you're mood boarding it almost, do you draw out how you think the set's going to look? Is there a floor plan? What's that like?
So I'm not great. I'm not great at drawing or painting. So I will do some sketches on my notebook that no one is allowed to see. um, but then I will probably try to find pictures from other films or any pictures that I can actually that make me feel something. Any pictures that I can see and say, oh, that would actually look sick in my film and in this story. Because the main thing is you need to be very respectful to the story and you need to listen very careful to the director. And that's the main thing about production design, because it's their vision. You just have to make it come to life.
Yeah, it sounds like it's something that I don't think, at a student age, it's something really difficult to think about when you're sort of in your first year. I know when I was in my first year, thinking about production design, it wasn't really even in my forefront at all. And you've now been sort of production designer, actor, and directing. Which role do you think is sort of you're gravitating towards the most?
At the moment, I think production design for sure, because I'm just constantly thinking about it and I feel very driven when it comes to production design. But I also want to direct. I really like directing.
And are there certain eras or specific? I know we talked about more like style with Kill Bill and Wes Anderson. Are there certain eras that you would really want to tackle with production design, or certain ones that you're just like that every time I see it in a film it just looks great?
Yeah, I think I want to do many different things. I for some reason I really want to do a sci-fi film because I want to make a spaceship by myself. I don't know why. I just want to make a spaceship from scratch. Um, but there's this really good production designer. I'm just trying to remember. I think it's like Connor and Tyler Barn or something. Yeah, I think they called Connor and Tyler Barn. And they do low budget films, but they are very much inspired by Wes Anderson as well. So if you see their films, you can tell that they're low budget, probably student films. But the production design is so amazing. You can tell so many different things about the characters. You don't even need to listen to the script. You just look at the image and you know what's going on. And I think that's the powerful thing about it, because that's what cinema is basically. For me at least, I prefer to be able to tell a story visually.
Yeah, well, that's amazing, and you've already got. I mean, you're sort of shooting for the stars with sci-fi, but that's great to aim for. And I think production design is one of those things where it can make a production look so much like it's got such a bigger budget than it ever had. Like when we did our university film shoot, we shot part of it in like we actually for the first time ever brought a production designer onto set. For me, it was my first time co-directing something where we had a production designer, and they brought the sort of hospital setting that we had for one of our scenes so to life. Like, it made it look like the budget was way higher than what we actually had to work with. And yeah, and I think it just has that power, doesn't it, to really elevate a project.
Exactly, and it's something that film students don't usually think about. It was something I never thought about last year. I would never think, oh, maybe I should do production design. I'm not gonna lie to you, I didn't even know what it was last year. I didn't even know what it was. But then I was thinking, how can I make my film look more realistic? I don't want my film to look like a normal student film. I want to bring it to life. And that's when I discovered production design, and it changed everything for me. To be honest with you, I would prefer to invest on production design and props than a good camera, I think.
Wow, that's telling us that you're set on this. I mean, why do you think then students, when they first start because I think a lot of students when they first get into film are extremely visual anyway, but why do you think production design is something that slips under the radar?
I don't know. It's something we never really talked about. Is it like I don't really hear people talking about production design. It's crazy. I think it's because we're all very worried because we're trying to get all the technical skills. So we're trying to find good cameras to work with, sound, and just get all these vital skills that you need to get in the industry. So we forget about other things that can actually improve our films. I think that's what's going on, but I don't know.
And for you, obviously, you're based in Greece at the moment. We're doing this, this episode of the podcast, even though Ava's based, in Canterbury, all the way from in Greece today. Are there sort of film projects or, maybe this is more related to theatre that you've done, sort of growing up in Greece?
Not really. I'm not gonna lie to you. Film here is not big at all. There's only this one director from Greece that I really like.
Is it Yorgos Lanthimos? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love him. I just love him to bits. He's so nice. But to be fair, apart from him, I don't know any other Greek directors that I admire as much as him. They're really interested in different arts, but film is just one of those things that we're not really good at. So I never really had a chance to work on something, even though I have many friends that we would shoot. It's so dumb. We would shoot like skateboard videos, more like street style. My love for cinema just improved so much when I moved there because I met so many different people that liked film as well. When I would talk about cinema here to someone, they would be like, well, you want to become a director? That's such an unusual thing. No one wants to do that anymore. So it's definitely something that you would struggle with if you decided to live in Greece, for sure.
I mean, Yorgos Lanthimos is luckily, maybe even paving the way because I think with, I guess, different places have their different, commitments in art form and, there's beautiful Greek art elsewhere maybe, but he as a director is incredible. I mean, The Lobster is one of my favorite films. It's just the dialogue shouldn't work, but somehow it does.
Oh, yeah, of course I have. Have you watched Dogtooth?
No, yes, I started watching Dogtooth. I couldn't get invested in it, unfortunately.
Hard, yeah, it's actually a very hard watch. I'm not gonna lie.
Well,
I struggle as well.
I did watch Killing of a Sacred Deer though, and I did enjoy that.
That's also nice. That's also very good. He has a very unique style. He started from commercial works actually. I read this article that was about him and then watched this interview that he did, and he said the exact same thing about film school here because I think he went to a Greek film school and he struggled to get into the industry. But he's such an amazing director that of course he would find his way at some point for sure.
Yeah, and the sort of your talent will take you through, and I guess you end up finding the place you're going to be anyway. So no, that's really cool. And I would thoroughly recommend The Lobster. I know that it's not my job, it's Harry's job to recommend the film on the show, but check out The Lobster, I think, from both of us. Now we're going to move back to the discussion in just a moment to keep talking with Ava about production design. Really enjoying this discussion. I'm learning a lot because, production design is not my thing. But we're going to move over to some of our other features in the show now. You know what time of the show it is here on a Thursday. It's Sammy Bacon time. Every single week, Sammy he brings a quickfire album review each and every single week to the My Generation podcast. And here is the album that Sammy recommends this week.
Hi everyone, what's going on? Hope you're doing well. Hope you're enjoying whoever's on the podcast. Here today, the recommendation is awesome, legendary, Danish post-punk and noise rock band Ice Age and their seminal, can't speak, but it's a very good album and it's called Ploughing into the Field of Love. And on this album, Ice Age move on from the very raw post-punk and noise rock roots and enhance it and embellish it with strings, horns and acoustic guitars. And on this album there is such a Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds vibe. This album is grandiose and confident and harrowing and depressing. The song like The Lord's Favourite is this swaggering rockabilly-esque song and then it's contrasted with a more softer, more gentle but equally banging track, Against the Moon, which has these wonderful strings, horns, and these piano arpeggios. Ice Age, fantastic band. This is a brilliant record, and is one of Ice Age's longest records. It's 50 minutes, and that's not, the longest record out there, but considering the two previous albums were barely half an hour long, this is a massive artistic step forward for Ice Age, and a must-listen to record. Ice Age, Plowing to the Field of Love. Listen to it now.
Thank you for that, Sammy. We're going to be tuning in once again with Sammy next week to hear what his next album review is. Really great to have him on the show every week, bringing this wealth of musical knowledge to the listeners, to you, the listeners. And now we're going to go over to Harry Munday. Obviously, Ava, you know Harry very well.
Of course I do. He's lovely.
Lovely, wise Harry. Every single week he now recommends a film. He's only been doing this for a few weeks on the show, but he's a great guy. Always here to present another new films. You've already got The Lobster, but here is the film that Harry recommends.
Dear old Harry here again, back with this week's film recommendation. This one is the movie that kick-started the whole superhero genre. I'm not on about your Spider-Man, your X-Men, or your Blade. I'm talking about The Rocketeer. For those of you who don't know your history of superhero movies, originally it started out with your Superman trilogy, or Superman quadrilogy, and your Batman quadrilogy. They were all nice and dandy, but that became what superhero movies were the standard for then. And it just showed other films like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I think, even the Zorro movies came out. I think Marvel's really old Captain America and Iron Man movies back then all followed the same sort of style as Superman and Batman, until this one movie shone out as an indie piece, which is The Rocketeer. The most simple superhero in the most simple of situations. Just a man finds a military-grade jetpack, puts on a helmet, and fights. What more classic superhero life could you want? For anyone who hasn't seen this, I would strongly recommend watching this straight away.
And thank you for that, Harry. We're going to tune in, as I said, with Sammy once again next week, and always every single Thursday here on the show. Harry and Sammy bring their album reviews to the show. Now, before we go back to Ava to continue our discussion, we've got Anna E. She's a Portuguese musician, and she is bringing her song I Miss You to our show today. We've played it a few times on the podcast before, but it's such a great song, I have to play it again. Here's I Miss You by Anna E.
I wish I could go back to when we first met. I can't let go of you. I've been waiting for so long just to see your face once more, but you're gone now, and I don't know for how long. Oh, I need you now. I miss you, boy. I'll tell you the truth. Yeah. I've been thinking about you. Oh, do you still remember the time we spent together when we joked around and you showed me how you see the world? And now I know that it's you that I need you. Hey, hey. Oh, I need you now. I miss you, boy. And I'll tell you the truth, yeah. I've been thinking about you. Oh, hey, hey, oh no. Well, I understand I'll find my way. Oh, I need you now. I miss you, boy. I'll tell you the truth. I've been thinking about you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was I Miss You by Anna E. Her links will be in the description so you can check out her work. She does original songs, she does covers. Really, really great feature. We've had her on the show before. She is lovely. And we'll be going back to Ava right now to continue that discussion. So we've talked about, Yorgos Lanthimos, one of the best directors. Love his work. And we've talked about, coming over here and how that's inspired you. Has a lot of your journey into film been due to just being surrounded by those like-minded people?
Yeah, actually there is. I think at uni there's so many different artists. I would call them artists because everyone wants to do something different. I thought coming to uni I would find a lot of people want to do the exact same thing. I thought everyone would want to be a director, but it's crazy how everyone just wants to do something completely different. I find it so amazing. Wanted to go after different parts of filmmaking, different styles, completely different styles. And I think that's the most interesting part of going to film school.
Yeah, I think that's a real pro for university because we've had, people on the podcast talk before about, pros and cons of university. We had Owen Laws on the show. I mean, I think knew Owen. He was a film student at Canterbury Christ Church, and we all love the course, and even Owen thinks the course is a good course, but university wasn't right for him. But I think you're bringing up a really good point there if you want to go really in the argument for universities, that it just does put you in that sphere of like-minded people. And I think for you've had a really interesting experience where you've now picked up on a job that you didn't even know existed as one that you might now actually take on into the industry, right?
Exactly, yeah. I was so determined to just do directing before I came. And I just want to completely change that and follow something completely different almost. But that's the beauty of it, You find out about many different things in the industry and you decide what works for you and what doesn't.
And what would you say are the biggest then, taking the dive into a production designer's mind, that some of the biggest do's and don'ts when it comes to production design?
A big do is to go and try to find props in charity shops and thrift stores and not go online, because I think if you try to go online you'll just spend your whole budget on 10 things. Try to find free stuff. For example, I always use the prop room at university because you can just rent them out for free, and when you have a low budget, especially if you just got into the industry, it's a great way of trying to create something more inspiring with less money, because at the end of the day, it is a bit all about money when it comes to production. It's a big stressful thing trying to get everything under the budget. So definitely go and find your stuff at thrift stores and charity shops. You can actually ask them if they can rent them for you, so you don't even pay the full price and keep them. What else? I like making stuff from scratch. For example, if there's something specific I have in mind, for example, in the last film, I wanted to do this wallpaper, but I wasn't even allowed to get a wallpaper because I used my student house and the landlord would kill me if he found out. So I had to make my own wallpaper from scratch, and it was so fun and so easy and so much cheaper to do. And I also want to do this table that I already had in my room, but it wasn't the right color. And sometimes I'm such a perfectionist. I was like, no, it is not the right color. I need to change the color. So I just, instead of purchasing a new table, I just painted it, simple as that.
Yeah, really working with the resources. And then sometimes you get that mix of a location, don't you? So when you go into a space, there might be some things that suit it and some that don't. I know when we shot part of our film on like in like a bar setting, and then we did have to tweak some things, but we didn't have to tweak the whole place. There were a lot of great stuff just there, and a lot of that's down to location design, which kind of ties into it. And yeah, when we had our production designer on board for the hospital scene that we shot, wow, yeah, they were just sat in the corner for the first hour just on the floor doing like all the production design, where they just like laid out all their props and bits and pieces they brought, and they were kind of building this monster in front of us. It's I don't know how that works in your head.
Yeah, that's actually a great way to go. If you lay down on the floor everything you have, I love it doing it as well, because you can see everything you have, and it's so much easier to imagine it visually, because you got everything in front of you there. So it's a great way to go.
I think the motto of that is then give your production designer space on set to work.
Oh yeah, you do. That's why I use my student house. That was my main concern, because I want to spend a lot of time on set and try to build it as I wanted to. So just use my own house. So I didn't even have to leave. I was there for days. So just when the crew would go, I would just stay back, and just work on it and try to create even more stuff and see how everything works together. So yeah, you try to spend as much time as possible on set.
Yeah, and like maybe even try and visit it with the director beforehand, so you can get a feel for what it's going to be. Because yeah, I didn't only really through talking about this am I realizing how close location and production design are as jobs.
Oh yeah, they are. Yeah, you always need to be with the director or work very closely with the director, because you are their eyes. You are their eyes of the director.
Which is, some people would argue, is the cinematographer, but no, it's the production designer.
Oh yeah, sorry. I think it's the production designer.
What I'm going to have to do then is bring a cinematographer onto the show and have a battle of who is the eye of the director.
Yeah, I would love that.
Oh, that would be amazing. We're going to have to, because I know that at university, some of our lecturers, even with you'll probably attest to this, where they'll strongly be able to argue, and I think this is a positive of the course. They argue why their bit is the most important bit. So like the guy who teaches the editing module, I love him. He was one of the people who helped me get on the course, really, just helped convince me that this was the right decision. Really owe a lot to him. And he was basically like, this is the most important bit of the film. It's where you assemble the whole thing. And then to the cinematographer, it's like, no, this is where the frame is. We do the whole framing. So why do you think then the production designer is the eyes for the director as opposed to the cinematographer? What
we create the whole world around the character, and what's the best way of telling the story about the character if not through the world we live in? I think the production designer should work also very closely with the cinematographer. At some point, I really wanted to be a cinematographer, but I just found that through not just props, colors, textures, and shapes, even if you don't exactly know why they're there, you can understand deeply inside of you. You can always tell. You don't even have to... I can't even explain it to you. It's just, you can feel it in you. For example, when you see specific shapes and specific textures and specific colors, your brain feels different things. Different colors will bring different feelings to you. Different shapes will make you feel a different way. For example, when you see vertical lines, and you see a character sitting behind those vertical lines or in front of those vertical lines, it's almost like putting this character into a prison, because we have in our brains, we're always thinking of those lines as cells,
Yeah, I think that is interesting, because shapes do actually have an influence. A movie that I've talked about far too much on the podcast. It's my favourite movie ever. It's called The Fountain. I know I've gushed about The Fountain enough, and I've sent you numerous screenshots from The Fountain, hey, look at how cool this is. But in the 3 different storylines, they actually do squares, circles, and triangles based on the meanings of each story. So the future story is more spherical, because it's more perfect, and all the edges of everything are shapes, but then the triangles are a little bit like, I don't know how to describe it because I'm not a production designer. But yeah, no, that fully makes sense. And when you say textures, what do you mean by textures?
Anything can be a texture. Wood can be a texture. Something shiny can be a texture. Anything really that you can touch can be a texture. So I always try to bring different things, because if you get a room, a very plain room with just the furniture that is already in there, maybe one sofa, one chair, and just white walls, that will not always work with the characters that you have. That will work with very specific characters. And when you're watching a narrative that has nothing to do with that space, you will never make the connection in your head, ever. You need to get into the character's head as well and think, how would this character make their room? What would they choose to have in their own space? What books would they read? What posters would they have? All that kind of stuff. Because it's like telling their story. It's their story.
But, all this thought has gone into, because then the audience sort of make these micro judgments based on the little bits they're seeing. I did actually want to bring this discussion more to now your personal thoughts on something. So the world is obviously moving in an interesting direction where in regards to CGI, and obviously there are many ways that CGI and visual effects are done now. You've got green screen, which has been around since for actually a lot longer than I thought, actually. But sort of newer techniques like have you seen Star Wars: The Mandalorian?
I haven't actually. I haven't even watched all of Star Wars films. I feel so ashamed to say that.
Ava, we can no longer do this podcast, unfortunately.
I will, though. I promise I will.
That is Ava's promise. So by the time hopefully this episode's come out, Ava will have watched all of Star Wars, and she can be forgiven for that. But no, that's fine. The Mandalorian's an interesting example because what they do in that show is, instead of using just CGI, blue screen, green screen, and then a background, they actually use projection mapping. So they have a room, quite a big room, with the scene actually projected on LED panels on the floor. And I don't know if it's on the floor, but it is on the ceiling and the walls. And then when the camera moves, the camera's geared up to the LED mapping, so the actual walls move so that the perspective stays right. So it works because you actually have real physical light bouncing off you. So it actually looks really good. What do you think that does for someone like a production designer, where the job is almost being replaced by these screens?
So basically, the production designer also needs to work on this, because before you send it to the editor, or the people that will do the special effects, you need to make sure that the actual things that you use work. So before we send it to the editor, we will always, as production designers, check if it will work for them, if you know what I mean. So it is not like replacing the production designer. You're walking as well into this. I actually looked into this projector, map projecting, what do you call it? Yeah, when we're talking about the video clip, I was actually looking into it, and I was really interested to ask you if you would like to do something like that, but projecting on people instead of walls and floors.
Yeah, because that's another interesting thing. There's so much stuff you can do, and I mean, yeah, me and Ava are working on university projects at the minute. Projects that some are actually going to be quite long in the making. So by this time this comes out, we won't have done them yet. But so many ideas floating around already, and yeah, you've thought about projecting just directly on images from projectors onto people, but then you can put them on LED panels and have it behind them. I assume this just adds more to your toolbox as opposed to making the job redundant.
Yeah, I really like using technology to try to create different forms of art, and I really like combining different types of art to create something new. And I think in film, we are really lucky to do something that we can combine different things. We can combine animation, special effects, music, anything really, and just add it into the film. So I would like to experiment with many different things. I think that's the beauty of it. Trying different things and see what you like and what doesn't work, what does work.
Yeah, and you can get as you said, very experimental with it, because you don't have to have things that feel like a physical space. I mean, I know I've spoken to you about this, Anima, which is a Tom York, Paul Thomas Anderson short film that you can find on Netflix. I love Anima. Have you watched Anima yet?
Yeah, I saw the cinematography of it. I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but I just loved the choreography because I watched some of the scenes and it was so beautiful, and also the color palette.
And it's really abstract as well. So like there are some scenes that take place in a more normal setting. So mainly there's one on a tube, and then there's the sort of stuff in the sort of dark space where the whole background is just a wash of black, and then you're on this sort of white plane, and it's at an angle, and you don't really know where you are, but film gives you that avenue, doesn't it, to make those really experimental decisions.
Very abstract.
I would thoroughly recommend Anima. I'm just giving you loads of stuff to recommend, to be honest, on this episode. And I mean, what would you say is if we take maybe Wes Anderson and Tarantino aside, is there maybe a more obscure example of a film that you loved the production design of, that you maybe think not enough people appreciate its production design, or not enough people saw the film in general?
Have you watched Amelie?
Oh, I haven't seen the full movie, but I know the movie you're on about. I've seen parts of it, yeah.
That was the first time I fell in love with production design. I've said about so many different things and films, but I think Amelie was one of the first films that made me fall in love with production design. Who was it? Aline Bonetto? She's French, and she did the production design for Amelie, and it was just so beautiful. The house of Amelie's house and the cafe she was working at, everything is just so pretty, but also so realistic. Like you're watching the film and it doesn't feel like you're watching something. It feels like you are in the story. You're part of the story. Really brings you in.
Yeah, and I definitely need to check out Amelie, because I've only heard it's a very, very good thing. And I mean, production design and good quality production design has been around since really the beginning of cinema. I can only think back to like miniatures that were used in Metropolis, which is a film from 1929, and it's a sci-fi movie. But they used miniatures to make the. Have you seen Metropolis?
Metropolis? No, I haven't.
Yeah,
I'm actually Googling it right now.
It's a movie from the late 20s, and it's crazy. It genuinely is. It's far ahead of its time. It actually, there's little bits of it, dare I say, that feel modern, just in the fact that it is obviously a science fiction film. I've seen it. It's very, very good for its age. Obviously, it has aged. It's a film from 1929. It's a thoroughly enjoyable one, though, and I would actually recommend Metropolis, even though, it's going to be a very interesting one for a modern audience to see, and I think it's readily available online. But yeah, that's an example of a film where they were even thinking about production design in the late 20s, and even further back if you think to like A Trip to the Moon from 1901, which is a science fiction short film where they put like a person's face as the moon, and all the design that they did on that, and they had a spaceship in that. That was back in 1901. They had a spaceship in that, so if they can do it, Ava's going to build a spaceship on her own for a film. So
not making promises yet, but I will definitely try.
What's going to happen is someone's going to, in like 10 years down the line, there'll be like an Oscar award season for like best designed spaceship, and everyone will be like, oh my god, it's Ava from the My Generation podcast, and they're going to remember back. No, that's really cool. And I mean, have you seen A Trip to the Moon as well?
Yes, I have actually. This one, yeah.
Yeah, and that's also readily available online. I forget how good that is for its age, because it's also interesting just from a period piece what people thought would happen if you went to space. It's full of so much cool stuff in there. Now we're going to move back to Ava in just a moment to actually wrap up this week's episode of the show. But do you have a story to tell about the subject? If so, please do get in touch with the Facebook page at the My Generation Podcast. We'll have to have Ava back on the show to pit her against a cinematographer. So definitely get your questions in. Maybe you're considering production design, and we can bring questions to Ava next time she's on the show. We'd love to have Ava back on and bring that conversation and continue it. So I'm just going to tease ahead to a few more topics that we've got coming up here on the My Generation podcast over the next few Thursdays. Obviously on Sunday nights it's just me and you, the audience, having a chat every Sunday evening where it's an anecdote, movie review or more, and then on a Thursday it's a guest music feature, Sammy, Harry and all that great stuff. But over the next few Thursdays we're featuring Connor Jenkins. He's back on the show. We've had him on a few times before. Great guest. It turns out Connor is our massive nerd friend. He plays Dungeons and Dragons. We love it. He is a great Dungeons and Dragons player. Him and a few of his friends are building a story that we're going to play on the My Generation podcast very, very soon. They've been working away on that for us, and I'm really, really excited. It's going to be the first episode where I, as the host, kind of relinquish control of the episode to the guests, and we're going to play through Dungeons and Dragons. I've never played it before, so I'm really looking forward to playing my first proper game. And then we've got Sammy Bacon coming back on the show as a full guest. I mean, you've been hearing him over the past 10, 12, maybe more weeks doing album reviews, and we're keeping the conversation going on music. He is going to be talking about music through the generations, how music has changed over the eras. You can tune in for a couple of weeks for that. And then Joe Finnegan, also back on the show. We've already recorded this episode and it was a really fun chat. Joe is going to be talking about horror video games. Really cool, thrilling video games, what games you should be playing, a whole load of recommendations in that episode. Really looking forward to bringing that out as well the end of August, I believe, so stay in tune for that. Now we're going to go back to Ava in just a moment to wrap up this week's episode, but there are future topics I still am looking for people to talk about. I want to talk video games. I haven't really, besides the episode coming up with Joe, haven't really spoken to many people in the game sphere before. We've done an episode with Joe about it before, but I want to broaden that. Joe's great, and we're going to be featuring a lot more of Joe, so stay tuned for information on that. But I want to talk to other gamers. What games do you play? Maybe it's one or a genre of games we've not even mentioned on the show. So if you're between the ages of 18 and 35 and you're based in the area of Kent, then get in touch with the Facebook page at the My Generation Podcast, or you can email me. All the links that you need to get involved with the show are down in the description. So we're going to move back to Ava. I just want to ask you two more questions, Ava. And firstly is, what do you think you'd give as advice to a budding up-and-coming production designer based on, your early experiences of it? What would you recommend for people coming into this?
I would recommend do a bunch of research. I think that was the thing that helped me the most. Just researching your favorite films and try to find a production designer. Try to find interviews with those production designers. Going on YouTube, just looking up stuff and interviews with people that are in the industry and are doing production design professionally. They have a bunch of different amazing advices, and that helped me so much when I worked for the first time in production designing in my film. Amazing.
Well, if you're listening and you're a budding production designer, that's the place to go with Ava. And before I ask my final question to Ava, we're going to go back to our music feature. So we had Anna E on the show earlier with her song I Miss You, and we're going to be playing Sodachi, her other song. Anna E, just to remind you, she does originals and covers. All the links to those are in the description below, and she has always been a great feature for the show. We've had her on many times, and it's Sodachi back on the show with Anna E.
Saudade do meu amor. Saudade, saudade do teu amor. Saudade, saudade, não tem piedade de quem tem saudade de ti. Saudade de ti. Saudade de ti. Saudade do meu amor, do teu amor. Saudade de ti.
And that was Sodachi by Anna E. We featured it a few times on the show. Lovely, lovely song. Thoroughly enjoy that, and can't wait to feature more of her work in the future of the show. Don't forget, we feature a musician every Thursday. So if you or someone you know is based in Kent and they're a musical artist, you can also get in touch with the page to potentially have your music on the show as well. Don't forget that. But Ava, to round off this week's episode of the My Generation podcast, I'd just like to ask, what do you think you've learned by talking about your production design work here on the podcast?
That I have so many more things to learn about production design. That's what I've learned. And I have to watch old Star Wars films as well. I think the more you talk about it, the more questions you build inside your head. It just makes me more motivated to work towards it and make more amazing stuff.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ava. Can we get you back on the show to battle out against the cinematographer?
Please, I would love that. Thank you for having me.
No worries at all. It's been great to feature you. Obviously, we've been meaning to actually work together on a film project for so long, and I've known you've done this for a while, so I've been wanting to get you on the show, and finally we've done it. I hope you've all enjoyed this week's episode of the show, everybody. We've had cinematographers on the show before, so I might have to go back to some of them and see if they're willing to come on and have a battle for, justifying the importance of their roles, and as we love to speak to so many different types of filmmakers. And I imagine for myself and Ava, we've got so many, university projects coming up. There's always tons to share. You can follow my social media in the link below. Ava, is there anywhere people can go to find your work at the moment?
On Instagram, I put some of my photography, and I am putting most of my films. I will put most of my films on Vimeo, so I will link that on my Instagram page.
Amazing.
So my Instagram is Evaskuraki.
And I'll make sure that the Instagram link is in the description of this podcast episode. It'll be near the top of the episode, so make sure you go down there if you want to follow Ava's work, and you can find all her stuff over on Instagram, and then the links to her Vimeos and such. And that concludes this week's episode of the show. We've got Connor, Sammy, Joe, and so much more coming up on the show. And then we're obviously going to bring Ava back on the show in the future as well. So it's goodbye from Ava.
Bye, thank you.
And it's goodbye from me. And we'll tune in with you on Sunday for the next Sunday night edition of the My Generation podcast. I've been Max, the host, and we'll tune in with you then for the next episode.